My name is Sophia Calder. I was 18 years old when I finally left home, but the truth is, I'd been trying to escape that house since I was 4. Some families teach their children how to love. Mine taught us how to survive. And survival in our house meant learning how to betray each other before someone else did. My parents called it accountability. They said it built character. They said it kept us honest. What it really did was turn 4 children into surveillance cameras, constantly watching, constantly listening, constantly afraid that silence would cost us more than the truth ever could. The first time I understood how the system worked, I was 4 years old. Marcus was 6. We were alone in my bedroom, sitting cross-legged on the floor with plastic cups of grape juice, something we weren't supposed to have upstairs. I remember my hands shaking as I lifted the cup. I was always careful. Careful was how you stayed alive in that house. But kids are clumsy, and fear doesn't make you graceful. One drop spilled, just one. It splashed onto the cream-colored carpet like a bruise forming in real time. I froze. My heart slammed so hard I thought it might give me away. I yanked off my shirt, spit on the fabric, and started scrubbing the stain like my life depended on it. Because it did. Marcus stood up. I didn't even hear him leave the room. I only heard his voice from the top of the stairs. "Sophia spilled juice upstairs," he announced. "She's so clumsy." That was all it took. I didn't hear what my parents said. I didn't need to. I recognized the sound of the drawer opening, the weight of leather being lifted. 1, 2, 3. I didn't scream. I learned early that screaming just made it worse. I didn't get dinner that night. While I lay there sobbing into my sheets, I could hear Marcus downstairs being praised like a hero. "You're so mature," my mother said, her voice warm and proud. "So responsible." My father laughed. "That's my boy." I was 4 years old. That same year, my twin sisters were born, Zoe and Luna. And that's when the house gained 2 more sets of eyes. At first, my parents were perfect. They always were, in the beginning. They cuddled the twins, kissed their foreheads, called them miracles, until the twins turned 3. That's when the affection stopped. No hugs, no gentle voices, no comfort after tears. Affection became currency, and betrayal became the price. By the time I was 10, I'd lost count of how many times I'd been punished. For crumbs on a plate, for folding towels wrong, for crying too loudly, for wearing clothes that didn't hide the bruises well enough. Marcus and the twins only got punished once or twice a year. I got it weekly, not because I was worse, but because I'd learned something they hadn't. I learned what pain felt like. And once you know that, you don't want anyone else to feel it. I never told on them. Not once. Even when I caught Marcus breaking rules. Even when I saw the twins sneaking food or skipping chores. Sometimes I took the blame myself. And in a twisted way, it worked. My siblings felt safest around me, but they never protected me back. Because there was something they loved more than me. Our parents. Over time, the narrative shifted. I wasn't the quiet one anymore. I was the problem, the troublemaker. If Marcus complained that I snored, my mattress disappeared for a week. If I used his cologne by accident, I wasn't allowed to shower for 3 days. Nothing I did was ever right. By the time I was 18, I didn't believe in family the way other people did. When I saw loving parents on TV, I felt angry. It looked fake. Unreal. Like a lie designed to make people like me feel defective. My GPA was 1.2. Not because I was stupid, but because survival leaves no room for dreams. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I could not stay in that house. And I didn't care what it cost to leave. Because anything was better than being loved conditionally. Anything was better than learning to betray the people you loved just to stay safe. And I didn't know it yet, but leaving that house was the moment everything began to unravel. I left home with a trash bag full of clothes and a body that flinched at kindness. That sounds dramatic, but it's the truth. When you grow up in a house where affection is earned through betrayal, the simplest gestures can feel like traps. A hug feels like a setup. A compliment feels like the calm before punishment. Even silence feels loud, because in my parents' home, silence meant someone was waiting for you to mess up. When college season came, my classmates were talking about dorm decor and meal plans like it was a new adventure. My GPA was a disaster, 1.2, because I'd spent my childhood trying to predict footsteps instead of studying for exams. But I didn't care where I went, only that I went. I paid a classmate to let me sleep on the floor of his dorm room. His name was Tommy. At the time, he was just calm. That was the first thing I noticed. The kind of calm that made me suspicious. He didn't have the sharp edge my family had. He didn't look at people like they were either tools or threats. He didn't scan the room the way I did. He walked like he belonged in the world. When I handed him the crumpled cash, money I'd saved by skipping meals and pretending I wasn't hungry, he looked uncomfortable. "You don't have to pay me like that," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "I mean, yeah, we'll split groceries or whatever, but Sophia, it's a floor. It's not the Ritz." I laughed automatically. Not because it was funny. Because laughing was what you did when you didn't know what else was safe. "I'm fine," I said quickly. "I won't be in the way." The words came out before I could stop them. I'd spent my whole life learning how to be small. Tommy's dorm room was nothing special. 2 beds, 2 desks, a tiny window that overlooked the parking lot. But to me, it felt like a country without war. No shouting, no belts, no rules that changed depending on my parents' mood. The first night, I couldn't sleep. I lay on my makeshift blanket nest on the floor and listened to Tommy breathe from his bed, waiting for the moment he'd sit up and say I'd done something wrong. It never came. Instead, the next morning, he tossed me a granola bar without looking at me like he was doing me a favor. "Eat," he said, like it was the most normal thing in the world. I stared at the wrapper. Food had always been used as punishment in my house. Dinner could disappear for days if you failed. My stomach tightened the way it always did when something good happened. Tommy noticed. He didn't push. He just said, softer this time, "You don't have to earn it." That sentence landed in me like a stone. I swallowed hard, nodded, and forced myself to eat anyway. Over the next few weeks, something quietly shifted. Tommy started walking me to class when he noticed I always hovered near the door, like I needed an escape route. He saved me a seat in the lecture hall without making a big deal about it. He didn't ask too many questions, but he watched me in a way that felt protective, not controlling, protective. And because I didn't know how to accept gentleness, my nervous system translated it as danger. That's how trauma works. It trains you to fear what you deserve. By the time Thanksgiving came, Tommy warned me his parents were visiting. It should have been nothing. Normal people's parents visit. Normal people eat turkey and complain about traffic and take pictures. But the moment he said the words, my throat went tight. His parents. Adults. In my head, adults were storms. Adults were rules. Adults were punishment disguised as love. I spent the entire week leading up to their visit pacing the dorm room when Tommy was in class. I cleaned everything until my fingers were raw. I organized his desk, then reorganized it, then panicked because I'd touched his things without permission. On the day they arrived, I was standing by the door, heart pounding so hard I felt it in my teeth. Tommy had told me, "They'll knock, then you can open it. No pressure." But twice. I opened the door too fast, then immediately wanted to slam it shut. I braced myself, eyes squeezed tight, shoulders tensed, waiting for the inevitable explosion. "Oh, hi, sweetheart," a woman said. "Thank you for opening so quickly." I blinked my eyes open, confused. Tommy's mom stood there holding a pie. She smiled like I wasn't a problem, like my existence didn't require justification. Behind her, Tommy's dad gave me a polite nod and shifted a bag of groceries in his arms. "Hey," he said, "you must be Sophia. Tommy's told us about you." My stomach dropped. Told them about me? In my world, being talked about meant you were being evaluated, measured, judged, punished. I stepped back quickly, voice too quiet. "Hi." Tommy's mom stepped forward, and before I could flinch away, she hugged me. A real hug, not a performance. not a manipulation. A simple squeeze of arms and warmth and normalcy. My whole body froze like a frightened animal. She pulled back and smiled, apparently unaware she'd just cracked something open inside me. "All right," she said brightly. "Where can I put this pie?" The rest of the night, I was on my best behavior in a way I couldn't turn off. I didn't sit too comfortably. I didn't laugh too loudly. I offered to clean dishes before anyone asked. I apologized when I bumped the chair. Tommy kept giving me little looks like he was trying to tell me, silently, that I was safe. But safety didn't live in my bones yet. When his parents finally left, I stood near the door, waiting for the shift, waiting for the truth. Because in my house, the truth always arrived after the guests left. The masks came off. The punishment began. I prepared myself for Tommy to turn on me, for his face to change, for his voice to sharpen. Instead, he shut the door, leaned back against it, and let out a breath. "Thanks," he said, smiling. "You were amazing, seriously." I stared at him. "What?" I asked, because my brain couldn't process it. He walked over, gently bumped my shoulder with his, and said, "My mom loved you. My dad, too. They think you're sweet, and honestly, I'm glad you were here." The room tilted. For a second, my mind tried to rewrite what happened, because the best liar is your childhood trauma. It tried to tell me, he's being sarcastic. This is the part where he humiliates you. This is the part where he calls you worthless. But Tommy didn't. He hugged me again, brief, safe, no pressure, and said, "You did great." That night, I lay on the floor staring at the ceiling, my heart doing something unfamiliar, grieving. Not because I missed my parents, because I finally understood what I'd never had. And with that understanding came a truth so sharp, it made me nauseous. My parents weren't strict, they were psychotic. And they'd built a whole system designed to make us turn on each other so we'd never turn on them. The next day, my phone rang. Unknown number. For a moment, I thought it might be them, my parents. Marcus, a trap. But something in my chest told me to answer anyway. "Hello?" My voice came out thin. There was breathing on the other end. So quiet it could have been mistaken for silence. Then a whisper, "Sophia." My blood went cold. It was Zoe, one of my twin sisters. She sounded like she was hiding in a closet, like the walls were listening. "Please help me," she said. A pause, a swallow, a broken breath. "I'm sorry," she whispered, like she was apologizing for existing. And then the line went dead. I stared at my phone like it had turned into a weapon. In my head, I heard my parents' voices. "Don't get involved. Don't make it worse. If you tell, you'll regret it." But I also saw the carpet stain, the belt, the pillow in my mouth. I knew exactly what that whisper meant. It meant the house had found a new punching bag, and this time, it wasn't going to be me. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the floor of Tommy's dorm room, staring at the underside of his bed frame, replaying Zoe's whisper over and over in my head. "Please help me." 2 words that weighed more than everything I owned combined. By morning, my decision was already made. I didn't tell Tommy at first. Not because I didn't trust him, but because trust to me still felt like something you rationed, like water, like air. I skipped my first class and drove home instead. The house looked exactly the same. Same white siding, same trimmed hedges, same windows that reflected the sky like nothing ugly had ever happened behind them. I parked 2 streets down and walked the rest of the way, heart hammering so loud I was sure the neighbors could hear it. I told myself I was just there to check on Zoe, to see her, to make sure she was okay. But deep down, I knew better. I was there to take her. Zoe answered the door barefoot. That alone told me everything. She looked smaller than I remembered, thinner. Her hair was pulled into a low, messy ponytail, like she'd done it herself without a mirror. When she saw me, her eyes filled instantly, but she didn't cry. Crying wasn't safe in that house. "Sophia," she breathed. I stepped inside and shut the door quietly behind me, instinctively checking the hallway. My parents weren't home. I'd planned it that way. "Are they," I started. "At work," Zoe whispered. "They'll be back in 2 hours. 2 hours. That was all the time we had. Her room looked stripped, bare. The walls were too clean, like nothing personal was allowed to exist there for long. A control tactic I recognized immediately. "Show me," I said gently. Zoe hesitated, eyes flicking toward the hallway like the walls might report her. Then she lifted her shirt. My stomach dropped so hard I felt dizzy. Bruises bloomed across her ribs and stomach in shades of purple and yellow, some old, some new. Finger-shaped marks, a long welt that looked like it had been struck with something flexible. A belt? My vision blurred. "They said I deserved it," Zoe whispered, "because I didn't tell on Luna." I clenched my jaw so hard it hurt. I'd known this was coming. I'd known the moment I left, the system would turn on someone else. But knowing didn't make seeing it any easier. "You don't deserve this," I said, my voice shaking despite my effort to keep it calm. "None of you ever did." Zoe nodded, biting her lip. "I tried to be quiet," she said quickly, like she needed to justify herself. "I really did. I did everything right." That broke something in me. "You don't have to explain," I said. "You don't have to earn safety." She stared at me like those words didn't make sense. I made the decision then. "Pack a bag," I told her. "Just essentials." Her eyes widened. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere safe." She didn't ask more questions. That was the scariest part. Zoe trusted me enough to follow without details, without guarantees, without proof that this wouldn't make things worse. That kind of trust is terrifying when you know how easily it can be destroyed. We were out of the house within 15 minutes. I drove fast, too fast. Every car behind us felt like a threat. Every red light felt like a mistake. When we pulled into campus, Zoe pressed herself against the seat, eyes wide. "They'll find us," she whispered. "They always do." "Not today," I said, hoping confidence sounded like truth. Tommy was sitting on his bed when we walked into the dorm room. He looked up, confused, then saw Zoe's face. The confusion vanished. "Hey," he said softly, standing up. "I'm Tommy." Zoe nodded but didn't speak. I took a breath. "She's staying with us," I said, "just for a little while." Tommy didn't hesitate. "Okay," he said immediately. "We'll make it work." Something in my chest loosened. That night, I treated Zoe's bruises with shaking hands and stolen first aid supplies from the campus health center. She apologized the entire time. "I'm sorry," she kept saying. "I didn't mean to cause trouble." "Stop," I said firmly, catching her wrists. "You are not the problem." She looked at me like no one had ever said that before. We hid her bed behind Tommy's desk during room checks. Took turns sneaking food from the cafeteria. Zoe slept curled into herself like a question mark, flinching at every sound in the hallway. For the first time in her life, she slept through the night. Our peace lasted less than 24 hours. The call started the next morning. At first, my parents sounded concerned. "Sophia, honey," my mom said in a voicemail, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Have you seen Zoe? We're so worried." I didn't respond. The next message was colder. "You need to bring her home," my dad said. "Now." By evening, the threats came. "You don't want to do this the hard way." I blocked their numbers. Then Marcus called. "Hey, little sis," he said casually, like we were just catching up. "Mom and Dad are really worried about Zoe. Just let us know she's okay. No one's mad." I almost believed him. Almost. But I'd spent my entire childhood watching Marcus say whatever earned him praise. His concern sounded rehearsed. Zoe overheard the voicemail and panicked. "What if they call the police?" she whispered. "What if they say you kidnapped me?" The thought hit me like ice water. Legally, Zoe was a minor. Legally, I was in deep trouble. But morally, sending her back wasn't an option. "We'll figure it out," I promised her. I didn't know how. The next day, Tommy pulled me aside. "My RA is getting suspicious," he whispered. "Extra person, extra food. We need a backup plan." Panic clawed up my throat. We had no money, no family, no safety net. That night, while Zoe slept fitfully, I lay awake planning our next move. Running scenarios, calculating risks. I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I would never let my parents hurt her again, even if it meant losing everything. The next few days blurred together. I asked around campus for help, swallowing my pride until it tasted like blood. Most people looked at me like I was insane. Finally, I ran into Andrea from my psychology class. She mentioned an off-campus apartment, a storage room, barely big enough for a mattress. "It's not much," she warned. "It's perfect," I said, nearly crying. We moved Zoe that weekend. Secondhand clothes, a cheap mattress, a plastic bin for her things. Andrea's roommates, Claire and Victoria, didn't pry. They didn't need details. They just nodded and made space. For the first time since I'd brought Zoe to campus, she smiled. I should have known it wouldn't last, because my parents never stopped hunting. And when they lost Zoe, they came for me. Things were quiet for exactly 7 days. Not peaceful, just quiet in the way a forest goes silent right before something snaps a branch. Zoe started doing homework at Andrea's kitchen table, hunched over like she expected someone to yank her backward at any second. She barely spoke, but she laughed once, actually laughed, when Victoria burned toast and set off the smoke alarm. The sound startled her so badly she clapped a hand over her mouth, like joy itself might get her in trouble. I picked up extra shifts at the campus coffee shop to cover groceries. My feet ached, my hands smelled like espresso no matter how much I washed them, and my nerves lived permanently on edge. But we were surviving until Marcus walked in. I was wiping down the counter when I felt it, that familiar pressure between my shoulder blades, the sense of being watched by someone who'd memorized my weaknesses. I looked up. There he was, expensive North Face jacket, clean haircut. That same practiced smile that always meant he wanted something. My stomach dropped. "Hey, little sister," Marcus said casually, stepping up to the counter. "Didn't know you worked here." My hands went numb. I glanced at my manager, who raised an eyebrow in silent question. I forced a tight smile. "I need a break," I said, already untangling my apron. Marcus followed me to a corner table, sitting across from me like we were equals. "So," he said, sighing dramatically, "I know you're mad at me." I stared at him. "What do you want?" He leaned back, crossing his arms. "This thing with Zoe has gone too far. Mom and Dad are freaking out." "Good," I said flatly. "They should be." His jaw tightened. "They said she's acting out, breaking rules. You know how she can be." The casual dismissal made my hands shake. "I saw the bruises," I said quietly, all over her body. Marcus shifted, uncomfortable but not surprised. "They're strict," he said, "but they love us. They just want what's best." I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "Is that what you tell yourself?" I asked. "That beating your kids is love?" "You always exaggerate," he snapped. "Always playing the victim." "I'm not playing anything," I said. "I'm protecting my sister." His expression hardened. "She's a minor, Sophia. This is kidnapping." There it was, the threat. I leaned forward, keeping my voice steady, even as my pulse roared in my ears. "Tell them to call the police," I said. "I'll show them her bruises. I'll tell them everything. Is that what you want?" For the first time, Marcus hesitated. He hadn't expected resistance. "Just let me talk to her," he said quickly. 5 minutes. "No." "They know where you work now," he said quietly. "You can't hide her forever." I stood up. "Watch me." I left him sitting there and went straight back to work, my hands trembling so badly I spilled milk all over the counter. The moment my shift ended, I ran. I didn't even bike. I sprinted the entire way to Andrea's apartment, lungs burning, heart pounding with dread. I burst through the door and stopped short. Zoe was sitting on the couch. Across from her sat Luna, my other twin sister. Luna looked up when she saw me, eyes rimmed red. "Hi, Sophia," she said softly. My blood ran cold. "What are you doing here?" I demanded. Zoe spoke before Luna could. "She came to check on me," she said quickly. "She was worried." I didn't believe it. Marcus shows up at my job, and suddenly Luna appears here? Number. This wasn't coincidence. "How did you find this place?" I asked. Luna looked down at her hands. "I followed you," she admitted, "after class. I just wanted to make sure Zoe was okay. Something felt wrong." I pulled Zoe into the storage room and shut the door. "Did you tell her where we were?" I whispered. "No," Zoe said immediately. I swear, she just showed up. I peeked through the crack in the door. Luna was texting someone, angling her phone away from me. My stomach dropped. "This is a setup," I whispered. "Marcus came to see me today." Zoe's eyes widened with terror. "What do we do?" "Pack," I said. "Now." While Zoe shoved her few belongings into a backpack, I walked back into the living room and sat across from Luna. "Who are you texting?" I asked calmly. "Just a friend," she said too fast. I held out my hand. "Let me see." "Why don't you trust me?" she asked, voice shaking. "Because you've never protected us," I said. Her face crumpled. "They're worried," she said desperately. "They promised they'd be better." Her phone buzzed. I saw the screen. "Mom, is she coming? Dad's waiting in the car." My vision tunneled. "They're here," I said quietly. Luna froze. "You need to leave," I said, standing up. "Now." "Sophia." "Now." She flinched and grabbed her coat. "They'll find her eventually," she said as she left. "You can't hide forever." The second the door shut, I texted Andrea not to come home. Then I grabbed Zoe in the backpack. We slipped out the back exit just as I saw my father's black Chevy Silverado pull up front. We didn't stop running until we reached the bus stop. That night, we stayed in a cheap motel paid for with my last paycheck. Zoe cried herself to sleep. "Why won't they leave us alone?" she asked. I didn't have a good answer. Control. Fear. Image. The next morning, I researched legal options on the motel's broken Wi-Fi. At 16, Zoe might qualify for emancipation, if we could prove abuse. While I was reading, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. A photo appeared. Zoe and me entering the motel. "We know where you are. Bring her home, or we call the police." Zoe went pale. "They're going to take me back," she whispered. "No," I said, though I had no idea how to stop it. We checked out immediately and took a bus toward campus. When we arrived, I spotted campus security talking to someone who looked disturbingly like my mother. I pulled Zoe in the opposite direction. "In here," I said, steering her into the library. We hid on the third floor for hours. By eve, Tommy texted, "RA is doing room checks tonight. Can't risk it." We ended up spending the night in a 24-hour laundromat. Plastic chairs, buzzing lights. The next morning, I woke to find Zoe gone. My heart stopped until I saw her outside talking on her phone. When she came back in, her face was unreadable. "It was Luna," she said. "She wants to meet." I shook my head immediately. "It's a trap." "She says she wants to help," Zoe whispered. "She feels bad." Hope is dangerous when you're desperate. "Fine," I said finally. "Public place. I'm coming." Because hiding wasn't working, and running only made us look guilty. The coffee shop Luna chose sat at the edge of campus, all glass windows and pale wood tables. Nowhere to hide, nowhere to whisper without being overheard. That was the point. Public meant safer. Public meant witnesses. At least, that's what I told myself. Zoe walked beside me with her shoulders hunched, hoodie pulled tight around her like armor. I kept my hand hovering near her elbow, not touching unless she reached first. Trauma teaches you that even protection can feel like control. Luna was already there. She sat by the window, alone, just like she promised. Her hair was pulled back, eyes shadowed with dark circles I'd never seen on her before. When she saw us, she stood too quickly, knocking her chair back. "Thank you for coming," she said. I didn't sit. Not yet. "Talk," I said. She swallowed, then nodded and sat back down. We took the chairs across from her, Zoe between us like a fragile truce. "I'm sorry about yesterday," Luna began. "They made me do it." "Made you how?" I asked, keeping my voice level. She glanced at Zoe, then back at me. "They said if I didn't help find her, they'd start treating me like they treated you." Silence pressed in. I believed her. That didn't mean I trusted her. "So why are you here now?" I asked. "Won't they punish you?" "They don't know," she said quickly. "I told them I was studying." She reached into her backpack and pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the table. Inside was cash. $300. "My birthday money," she said. "For food, or a motel, or whatever you need." Zoe stared at it like it might disappear. I didn't know what to say. After years of betrayal, this small act felt unreal, like a foreign language I barely understood. "There's more," Luna said, lowering her voice. "They're reporting Zoe as a runaway tomorrow." Zoe's fingers tightened around mine. "And me?" I asked. "They're saying you kidnapped her," Luna whispered. "They're telling people you've always been unstable." Of course they were. They'd spent my entire childhood building that story. I was the problem, the difficult one, the liar. "Thank you," I said finally, pushing the envelope back toward her. "But this doesn't fix it." "I know," Luna said. "I just didn't want to do nothing anymore." As we stood to leave, my phone buzzed. A campus alert. Safety notice. Missing student. Minor last seen with older sister. May require intervention. My stomach dropped. "They're turning the whole campus against us," I said. Luna's face drained of color. They didn't waste any time. We left immediately. We spent the next few hours hiding in the library, jumping at every footstep. Zoe pretended to read, eyes scanning the room instead of the page. I called Andrea. No answer. Then Victoria. "They came by this morning," she said, voice tense. "Your parents, looking for you and Zoe." "What did you tell them?" I asked. "Nothing," she said quickly. "Andrea told them to leave or she'd call the cops." I thanked her and hung up. By evening, we had nowhere left. I had $18. Tommy texted again. "Room checks tonight. I'm sorry." We ended up in a 24-hour laundromat, the kind that smells like detergent and exhaustion. We took turns sleeping on plastic chairs, our bags clutched tight. Sometime before dawn, I woke to find Zoe gone. My heart lurched into my throat. Then I saw her outside, phone pressed to her ear. When she came back in, she wouldn't meet my eyes. "It was Luna," she said. "She wants to help us, really help." I shook my head. "Hope is how they get you." "She says Mom and Dad are at work," Zoe said softly. "She just wants to talk." I saw the longing in her face. The desperate need to believe at least one sibling would choose her. "Fine," I said at last, "but we do this right." We met Luna again, this time with a plan and a decision, because hiding wasn't saving us anymore. It was time to stop running and start telling the truth. By the time we decided to stop running, exhaustion had carved something hollow into all of us. Zoe's hands shook when she held her coffee. Luna wouldn't stop scanning the room, and I felt like every decision I made could either save my sister or ruin her life permanently. The campus alert had changed everything. Zoe's face was now a description in an email, a missing minor, and my name followed hers like a warning label. Older sister, potentially unstable, may be exerting influence. "They're rewriting the story," I said quietly, as we sat on the floor of the library, backs against the shelves. "And if we don't speak up first, that's the version that sticks." Zoe swallowed. Who would believe us? I thought about that for a long moment. "My psychology professor," I said finally. "Dr. Barnes. He used to work with Child Protective Services." Luna looked up. "You trust him?" "I trust that he's mandatory to report abuse," I said. "Which means once we tell him, this becomes official. No taking it back." Zoe went pale. "If we do this," she whispered, "they'll hate us forever." "They already do," I said gently. "We're just finally going to say it out loud." I emailed Dr. Barnes from my phone, keeping it vague but urgent. "I need help. This is about child abuse. Please." He replied within minutes. "Come to my office at 3 p.m. We spent the next few hours hiding in plain sight, waiting for the clock to crawl forward. Every time someone glanced at Zoe for too long, my chest tightened. Every buzz of my phone made me jump. At exactly 3, we slipped out of the library and took back paths to the psychology building. Zoe kept her hood up. Luna walked close behind us. Dr. Barnes opened his office door the moment we knocked. "Sophia," he said, concern etched across his face. "I saw the alert. I'm assuming this is why you reached out." "Yes," I said, "but it's not what they're saying." He ushered us inside and shut the door. For the next hour, we told him everything. The system, the rewards for betrayal, the beatings, the silence. Zoe showed him the photos she'd taken of her bruises. Clear, time-stamped, impossible to explain away. Luna corroborated. She spoke haltingly at first, then faster. Like once she started telling the truth, it couldn't be contained anymore. Dr. Barnes didn't interrupt. He just listened, his expression growing heavier with each detail. When we finished, he leaned back in his chair. "What you're describing is serious child abuse," he said. "And the fact that it's gone on this long without intervention is deeply troubling." Relief flooded me, quickly followed by fear. "What happens now?" I asked. He folded his hands. "The first step is filing a formal report with CPS. That triggers an investigation." "Will they make Zoe go back home?" I asked, dread curling in my stomach. "Normally," he said carefully, "yes. But given the photographic evidence, we can request an emergency removal." Zoe exhaled shakily. "What about me?" Luna asked. "If I testify?" He nodded. "You could be removed as well." Luna stared at the floor. "And me?" I asked. He hesitated. "You're an adult," he said. "You can't be placed. And technically, you did take a minor without legal authority." The words hit hard. "So I could be arrested," I said. "Possibly," he admitted. "But being proactive helps. We file the report, then you present yourself voluntarily with Zoe and explain the situation." My hands trembled. The idea of walking into a police station, of facing my parents with authority on their side, made my throat close. But I knew he was right. Running had only made things worse. Dr. Barnes helped us file the report that afternoon. He documented everything. Then he called CPS directly. A caseworker named Beverly agreed to meet us at the campus police station. "I'll go with you," Dr. Barnes said. "I'll advocate for you." The walk there felt unreal, like stepping into a version of reality I'd spent my entire life avoiding. Beverly was waiting when we arrived. She had kind eyes and a no-nonsense posture. She listened, took notes, examined the photos. "I'm requesting emergency placement for both minors," she said firmly, effective immediately. Relief washed over me until the police officer stepped in. "We'll need to take a statement from you," he said to me, "about the alleged kidnapping." My heart sank. Through the window, I saw my parents' car pull up. My father stormed inside, rage barely contained. My mother followed, already wearing her performance. "I want to see my daughters," my father demanded. "They've been missing." My mother's voice rose, trembling just enough to sound convincing. "Sophia has always been troubled. She manipulates people." Beverly squeezed my hand. "This is common," she whispered. "They try to discredit the reporter." The girls were placed in emergency foster care that night. I wasn't allowed to go with them. As Zoe was led away, she clutched my hand like she might never let go. "You didn't do anything wrong," I told her, even as my own voice cracked. Then I was alone in an interview room, answering questions that felt like accusations. But for the first time in my life, the truth was documented. And even if my parents fought back, even if they tried to destroy me, they couldn't erase it anymore. 6 months can feel like a lifetime when you're waiting to see whether the truth will survive. For the first few weeks after that night at the police station, I lived in a constant state of suspended breath. Every unknown number made my chest tighten. Every knock on the door felt like it might be the moment consequences finally caught up with me. My parents did exactly what Beverly said they would. They denied everything. They told anyone who would listen that I was unstable, that I'd always been difficult, that I'd manipulated Zoe into running away because I was jealous, resentful, incapable of letting my family be happy. They hired a lawyer. They filed paperwork. They tried to press charges. And for a while, it worked. I wasn't arrested, but I was investigated. I gave statement after statement, reliving my childhood in windowless rooms with fluorescent lights. Each time, I worried someone would decide I'd crossed an unforgivable line. But something was different now. This time, I wasn't alone. Zoe and Luna were placed together in a temporary foster home with a quiet couple who didn't ask too many questions and didn't raise their voices. Zoe called me every night at first, just to hear my voice. Luna took longer, but when she finally did call, she cried so hard she could barely speak. "I didn't know it could be like this," she said. "I didn't know homes could be quiet." Marcus didn't testify for them. That surprised me more than anything. He didn't help us, but he didn't help them either. When investigators asked him questions, he stayed vague, non-committal, protective of himself above all else. For the first time, that strategy worked against my parents. CPS substantiated the abuse. Medical experts confirmed the bruising patterns. Therapists documented long-term psychological harm. Zoe's photos were entered into evidence, and slowly, painfully, the narrative shifted. My parents lost temporary custody, then permanent. I was sitting in Tommy's living room when the final call came in. Beverly's voice was steady, professional. "The judge has terminated their parental rights," she said, effective immediately. I slid down the wall and cried until my ribs hurt. Not because I was happy, but because something inside me finally unclenched. A few weeks later, Tommy texted me a news link. Local couple arrested for attempting to falsify foster parent backgrounds. I stared at the headline in disbelief. According to the article, my parents had moved 3 states away, joined a church, and presented themselves as grieving parents whose children had been stolen by the system. They'd even begun the process of becoming foster parents. Someone recognized them from a database. Their mugshots were attached. I showed the article to Marcus when he came over one evening. He read it silently, then looked up at me. "They'll never change," he said quietly. "No," I said, "they won't." But we did. Zoe and Luna eventually moved into a long-term placement that allowed frequent visits. I helped Zoe enroll in a new school. Luna started therapy and learned how to sleep without locking her door. One weekend, all 4 of us siblings got together at Marcus's apartment. Pizza boxes on the floor, a board game no one remembered how to play, arguments over Monopoly rules that didn't end in fear. At one point, I looked around the room at my siblings laughing, interrupting each other, existing without walking on eggshells, and felt something unfamiliar settle in my chest. Peace. Not the fragile kind that comes from silence. The real kind. The kind built on protection instead of punishment. We didn't erase the past, but we broke the cycle. And for the first time in my life, family didn't feel like something I had to survive. It felt like something I was finally allowed to build.